last week we talked about several of the lies that Satan has been telling you for generations. From everybody is having sex to sex is a natural part of a loving relationship. And what we found was that each of those was a lie. Well, today I want to look at the question that Satan has been getting generations of teens to ask, and that is the question, how far can I go? Now, I've been serving in the student ministry for almost 7 years now, and I have heard this question asked probably 100 times. Students want to know how far they can go physically without crossing the line. Right now, right where you're sitting, by a show of hands, how many of you want to know how far you can go physically without crossing the line? Don't be scared. Raise your hands if you really want to know the answer to that question. Because I know you don't want to disappoint God or your parents, right? Well, here's an interesting insight regarding this question. Nowhere in the Bible does it give us a specific answer, like you can only hold hands, or you can only kiss on the second Tuesday of the third month of the 16th year of your life. I mean, it doesn't give us that specific of an answer. But I bet some of you are like, all right, no specific answer? Wow. Well, hold your horses. Don't celebrate yet. Because it does give us a great principle to follow when we begin to ask this question. So let's look at God's word for help regarding this question. In the Apostle Paul's letter to the Ephesians, listen to what he wrote. Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise. So the question that each of you should be asking is not, how far can I go? Because that question has the wrong motive behind it. When you ask, how far can I go? You've already set yourself up for failure, because subconsciously, you're pushing yourself to the edge. You're wanting to know how close you can go to the edge without falling off. Well, students, the question we should be asking is, what is the wise thing for me to do? See, that is what the Apostle Paul wanted the Christians in Ephesus to ask. He wanted them to ask that question about wise decisions. And that is what we want for you. Now, I know it's not going to be easy, because the hard part of this question is, how do I know what is the wise thing to do? Well, let me share with you 4 common sense things that you must think about regarding sex. Number 1, the further you go, the faster you go. Basically, this principle suggests that from the time you say, hello, what's your name, to the time that you make out, there are many transition points. And I'm going to share with you examples of these points. You know what? I can remember back to the summer of 1990 when I first saw this hot girl named Brandy. She was working the register at Winn-Dixie. And I remember seeing her beautiful smile and hearing that southern country accent, which drove me crazy. Well, over time, I built up the courage to stop by and to talk to her. Even to the point that I would leave the frozen food section where I worked to go and bag groceries just so I could be near her. And over the next few weeks and months, I drummed up enough courage to ask her out on a date, to which she agreed, of course. But it wasn't long before we were holding hands as we sat in the movie theater watching Pretty Woman on our first date. See, in a few short weeks, we went from not even knowing each other to holding hands because of the physical attraction we had for one another. And yes, it wasn't long before I received my first kiss from her. So as you can see, things progress pretty rapidly. So you have to understand, the further you go, the faster you go. Number 2, the further you go, the further you want to go. See, in my story I just shared with you, I told you that I would often walk by just to look at Brandy, even before I knew her. But that wasn't enough. I had to get to know her. I couldn't help myself. So I made it a point to stop at her register and talk to her, even though I didn't like bagging groceries. Then, once I started talking with her at work, that wasn't enough. I wanted to go out on a date with her. Then, once we went out on a date, that wasn't enough. I had to hold her hand. See how the progression happens? See, this happens when we let the physical side of the relationship take the lead. And there may be some of you in this room tonight who know exactly what I'm talking about. You can't help yourself. And maybe for some of you, holding hands isn't enough. And you progress to kissing and think that that is as far as you're going to go. But honestly, the excitement kissing brought at the beginning begins to wear off as you progress further in the relationship. It's kind of like potato chips. I love the smell of a freshly opened bag. It smells great. And because of that smell, I have to eat a chip. But you know what? But I can't stop with just one chip. I have to have another, and then another, and then another. And before you know it, I've eaten the whole bag. Even though I may have told myself that I was only going to eat a few. Listen, drawing a line in the sand mentally does nothing to stem the physical desires that you have. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I've often told students, even my own 2 children, that they need to have drawn a line in the sand and know how far they're going to go in their relationship. But honestly, that thinking doesn't always work, because in your mind, when you draw a line about how far you're going to let your relationship go, and when you reach that line, you're going to say to yourself, okay, that's it. But unfortunately, the physical excitement is going to push you to want to go further. And that temptation to go further will always be in the forefront of your mind. Listen, I can't stress this enough. It is important to know that we have to ask the question, is this the wise thing to do? Because short of intercourse, there is no ultimate satisfaction. Our bodies were designed to go all the way. That's right. Your body was designed to go all the way. Therefore, understanding this principle is a must. The further you go, the further you're going to want to go. Number 3, the further you go, the harder it is to go back. And to help you grasp this principle, I have a little story I found about a student pastor who dealt with this issue. Listen to what it says. Layla came to my wife at camp with tears streaming down her face and a heart that was heavy with guilt. Layla told of how she had been forbidden by her father to see a particular guy. She disobeyed her dad and had been seeing him behind his back. They had been sexually involved for several months, and she wanted so badly to stop. That July, Layla resolved in her heart to end the relationship with Grant. She was a different girl from July to December. God began to move in her in ways that were obvious to all, and Layla became a leader in our ministry. Grant kept calling, but she resisted his pleas for a second chance. But just after Christmas, she decided out of kindness to go and see him. The principle of the further a student goes physically, the harder it is to go back became a scar she will wear for the rest of her life. Instead of starting at the beginning, Layla and Grant picked up where they had left off. Layla got pregnant. My wife took her to the doctor to confirm what she knew in her heart. I had the heartbreaking task of telling her mom and dad. See, once you've gone there, it's hard to go back. Number 4, where you draw the line determines 3 important things. Number 1, the arena of your temptation, the intensity of your temptation, and the consequences of giving in to that temptation. Now I'm going to explain each of these for you. The arena of your temptation. Now hear me on this one. When you draw a line in the sand, let's say kissing, you have determined what the level of temptation will be next for you. Now you may be saying, how is that? It's like this. Suppose you have a big test today and you didn't get to study last night, and you know that cheating is wrong, and you told yourself that you would never cheat on a test. But if you don't make an A on this test, you're going to lose out on a scholarship to your favorite college. Then you walk into the classroom early and no one else is in there, and lo and behold, right there underneath your desk are the answers to the test. Big temptation, right? Well, you've already drawn a line in the sand and said you wouldn't cheat. But under the circumstances, the temptation to use the answers to complete the test is pretty high. In your mind, you can actually justify why you should, and therefore you give in and use the cheat sheet. You gave into that temptation. Well, the same is true regarding your sex life. If you set a standard of only kissing, Satan is going to tempt you by planting in your mind and your body the desire to take it one step further. And each step further broadens your arena of temptation. How about number two, the intensity of your temptation. Listen, temptation increases with increased passion. In other words, passion increases as a couple moves closer and closer to intercourse. Every couple is going to be tempted. And in this area of temptation, where you draw the line determines the intensity or the pressure of the temptation that's going to take place in your life. Listen, it's not if temptation is going to come, but rather when temptation is going to come. And you're going to have to determine the level of pressure that you're going to feel in the relationship. It's that serious. And then number 3, the consequences of giving in to temptation. That's right. There will be consequences of giving in to any temptation. Whether you decide to draw the line, you must be ready for the consequences of crossing that line. If holding hands is as far as you say that you're going to go, and then one day both of your passions are running high and you end up kissing, you must be ready for the consequences. It may be guilt, or worst case scenario, strep throat or mono. But think about it. If a couple has drawn the line that so close to intercourse, you get the picture of what could happen. Students, there are consequences for giving in to the temptation Satan is pushing your way, and there is no way around it at all. So, as you've seen, the whole question of how far can I go is a hard question to tackle and to come to grips with. But here's what I know. If you aren't seeking out God's help, you will never have a chance against what Satan is trying to teach this generation. Students, listen to me. Out of everything that I've shared with you tonight about sex, there is one thing that I want you to remember when dealing with relationships and this whole idea of sex. You must, and I mean this must become second nature for you when you're faced with temptation of sex or anything else for that matter. And it's here it is, the question. Is this the wise thing to do? Now, whether you've gone too far in the past and you want to live a pure life for the rest of your life, or whether you've never really gotten close to sex, God wants you to remain pure. He wants you to understand that purity paves the way to intimacy. Now remember, Satan would have you believe something different. He wants you to see that sex is a natural thing, that it's not hurting anybody. He wants you to see that once you've had sex, the shame you feel, the guilt that you feel is nothing. He wants you to see that sex is okay. It's fun, exciting, and wonderful. So go ahead and do it. It's your life. But that kind of thinking must be thrown out the window. Listen to what the Apostle Paul says about this. Flee from all sexual immorality. Basically, what he is saying is run in the opposite direction. Flee from anything that is sexually wrong. And if you do this, I can promise you that when the day comes, when the wedding bells ring, you will have one of the most wonderful experiences in your life with the person God has chosen for you. And then, and only then, can you go all the way.